Some sacrifices whisper. Some kindnesses roar louder than thunder. This is the story of Lydia Marlo, a small-town teacher who sold her wedding ring to buy books for her students. She hoped no one would notice. But one night, her silent act brought the most unlikely protectors to her door. Welcome to Shadows of Dignity. Before we begin, comment below where you're watching from and subscribe to our channel. Every comment, gift, and membership helps us bring more heartfelt stories into your life. Lydia Marlo sat at her kitchen table, her late husband's wedding band gleaming under the flickering light. Her fingers trembled as she held it one last time. It wasn't just gold. It was memory, laughter, a promise that ended too soon. But tomorrow, it would buy books. Her classroom shelves were bare, cracked spines, missing pages, not enough copies for eager hands. She'd pleaded with the district, written letters, even begged at the school board meeting. All she'd received were polite smiles and budget constraints. So tonight, she would let go of the ring she'd worn for 20 years. The pawn shop would open at 9 a.m. By noon, her students would have books. She whispered, "Forgive me, Michael," pressing the ring to her lips. Then she placed it in a small velvet pouch. Across town, a man named Rex Malone, president of a local chapter of the Iron Horsemen motorcycle club, sat in a bar nursing a beer. He didn't know it yet, but that ring, Lydia's sacrifice, would soon pull his entire brotherhood into her world. Lydia's classroom smelled of chalk and old wood. She taught in an aged brick schoolhouse on the outskirts of town where peeling paint and flickering lights reflected the neglect her students endured. The kids loved her. They knew she stayed late to help. Brought snacks from her own pocket. Mended torn clothes with a sewing kit she kept in her desk. But love didn't fill shelves. Every time she asked students to share books, shame burned in her chest. Her colleagues admired her devotion but whispered, "She tries too hard." The principal publicly praised her passion, then privately reprimanded her for drawing unnecessary attention to funding issues. The humiliation worsened when the local bullies, a group of roughnecks who hung around the town's dilapidated gas station, started targeting her. Men who loitered outside the school, jeering at her for being a poor, widowed teacher, saw her carrying second-hand supplies. One sneered, "Maybe you should sell that ring on your finger. Books don't pay for themselves." They laughed. Lydia kept walking, jaw tight, pretending she didn't hear. But that night, she stood over her kitchen table and knew the bullies were right. She would sell the ring and somehow make dignity from sacrifice. The bell above the pawn shop door jingled. Lydia stepped inside, clutching the velvet pouch. Behind the counter, a burly man with a stained shirt looked up. "What ya got?" She unwrapped the ring. The man whistled. "That's a fine piece." "Sentimental?" Her throat tightened. "Very." He waited, assessing it as if it were just metal. "I can give you 400. Lydia swallowed. It wasn't enough. But she nodded anyway. "I'll take it." He slid the money across the counter. As she walked out, she felt like a thief of her own life. The ring that once symbolized forever now felt like betrayal. Yet, in her purse, the bills meant 20 new books. Later that day, she placed a fresh stack of novels on her classroom shelves. The kids gasped, touching the covers as if they were treasure. "Where'd they come from?" a boy asked. Lydia smiled, hiding her sorrow. "From love." But outside the school, the same group of men leaned against their pickup truck, smirking. "Guess the widow really sold her ring," one muttered. Their laughter echoed down the street. News traveled fast in the small town. Lydia had sold her ring. Some pitied her, others mocked her, and the bullies smelled weakness. One afternoon, as Lydia dismissed her students, she found her car tires slashed. A note under the windshield wiper read, "Books won't save them." Her chest tightened. Fear mingled with humiliation. She reported it to the principal, who sighed. "We'll keep an eye out, but don't stir up trouble, Lydia. You know how this town talks." She walked home in the dark, clutching her purse, hearing laughter in the alleys. That night, she collapsed at her kitchen table. "I can't do this anymore, Michael," she whispered. She stared at the empty space on her hand where the ring used to be. But across town, Rex Malone heard the bullies at the bar, bragging about teaching that widow a lesson. His jaw clenched. He slammed his beer down, eyes burning. He knew Lydia Marlo. She'd once tutored his niece for free after school. That night, Rex made a phone call. Engines would roar before dawn. The next morning, Lydia unlocked her classroom door. The hallway was strangely quiet, but as she stepped inside, she froze. Every desk was filled, not by students, but by men in leather vests and heavy boots. Iron Horsemen, rows of them, their patches gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Lydia held her breath. Her first instinct was fear. Why were they here? At the front of the room, Rex stood tall, hands clasped respectfully. He nodded toward the shelves. They weren't empty anymore. Piled high were stacks of new books, notebooks, and art supplies. Lydia's hand flew to her mouth. Rex's voice boomed. Firm, but gentle. "We heard you gave up something precious for these kids. Nobody humiliates a woman for loving her students. Not in our town." The room was silent. The bikers' presence was overwhelming, yet their eyes held respect. Lydia's knees trembled. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "Why?" Rex stepped closer, speaking low. "Because, Ms. Marlo, you once gave hope to my niece when no one else cared. Now, it's our turn." By afternoon, the entire town was abuzz. News traveled fast. Lydia Marlo's classroom was packed, not with students, but with leather-clad bikers. Some parents were alarmed, whispering about danger. Others felt a secret thrill that someone finally stood up for her. At the diner, the bullies scoffed. She called them in. Can't fight her own battles, so she hides behind outlaws. Their laughter was sharp, cruel, but underneath it was fear. They knew the Iron Horsemen's reputation. Meanwhile, Lydia sat at her desk long after school ended, her hand still shaking. She hadn't invited them. She hadn't expected anyone to care. But as she looked at the shelves overflowing with books, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Protected. That night, she prayed aloud. "Michael, I thought I'd lost everything when I let go of your ring. But maybe I gained something I didn't know I needed." Somewhere in town, engines rumbled into the night. A warning carried on wheels. The bullies weren't done. A week later, as students spilled out of school, the men parked their truck at the curb. Their boots hit the pavement heavily, their voices loud. "Nice library you got now, Ms. Marlo." One sneered. "Who paid for it? Your biker boyfriends?" The kids froze, eyes wide. Lydia felt her throat close. Shame burned on her face. She wanted to protect the students, but her voice trembled. "Get out now." The men laughed. One stepped closer and whispered, "You think those Iron Horsemen will always be around? They'll get bored. Then it'll just be you again." But before fear could settle, the deep roar of motorcycles echoed down the street. Engines revved like thunder, rolling in fast. Dozens of bikes rounded the corner, chrome flashing in the sun. The bullies instinctively recoiled. Rex led the pack, eyes cold, jaw clenched. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The roar spoke louder than any threat. The bullies stiffened as Rex dismounted. His boots hit the pavement like hammer blows. The other Iron Horsemen lined the street, engines idling. A thunderous silence. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," Rex said calmly, pulling off his gloves. "Looks like you have a lot to say to a school teacher." One man stammered. "We were just kidding." Rex stepped closer, his shadow engulfing the man's bravado. "Does she look like she's kidding?" His voice was quiet, but dangerous, like steel wrapped in velvet. Lydia stood frozen, heart pounding. The kids clung to her side, eyes darting between fear and awe. The bullies shifted uneasily, their smirks gone. One spat on the ground, muttering, "She ain't worth it." Rex's hand twitched, but he didn't strike. Instead, he leaned in and whispered, "If you ever touch her, her students, or her name again, remember this sound." He snapped his fingers. The engines roared in unison, shaking the pavement. The bullies scrambled into their truck, tires squealing as they fled. When silence returned, Lydia turned and found her students staring at her, wide-eyed. Some whispered, "They saved us." Others clutched their books tighter as if the angels themselves had placed shields in their hands. Rex knelt. He spoke to the smallest child, "Nobody bullies your teacher. Not while we're around." His tone was firm, but gentle. The children looked at him with something Lydia hadn't expected. Admiration. To them, they weren't thugs. They were protectors. Lydia's throat tightened. She'd spent so long shielding the children from the ugliness of the world. But here, standing in leather and chains, were the men society called dangerous, proving that safety can come from unlikely places. That night, when the last student left, Lydia whispered to Rex, "I don't know how to thank you." Rex shook his head. "You already did. Years ago, you gave my niece a chance. Now we're giving you one." For the first time in years, Lydia felt dignity return like sunlight breaking through clouds. That night, Lydia sat at her kitchen table, the same place where she once let go of her ring. But this time, her heart didn't ache with loss. She touched the edge of a book one of her students had left behind, its spine still stiff with newness. She whispered, "Michael, I sold your ring to buy these stories. I thought it would break me, but maybe this was the path I was meant to take." From her window, she heard the distant hum of motorcycles patrolling the town. Not violent, not threatening, protective. The bullies never came back. Their silence was louder than their threats. And Lydia knew why. She didn't feel alone anymore. She didn't feel small. Her classroom had become more than a place of learning. Now it was a fortress of dignity, protected by the strangest allies she could imagine. And Lydia Marlo understood. Sometimes protection doesn't come as angels in the sky, but as angels on wheels. By the end of the month, the town was divided in whispers. Some said Lydia Marlo was a saint, a woman who gave everything for her students. Others hissed that she'd gotten involved with criminals. Parents argued at church potlucks. The school board received anonymous letters demanding her removal. Lydia overheard teachers in the lounge. "She's bringing trouble here," one muttered. Another countered, "Or maybe she's the only one brave enough to stand up to it." It hurt. She never wanted to be the center of scandal. All she'd ever wanted was books for kids who deserved more. That night, Rex pulled up, finding her wiping tears from her desk. "They think I'm a disgrace," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, they're just scared. People hate what they don't understand. But your kids, they'll remember who fought for them." She held his words close, though the sting lingered. Sometimes, the hardest battles weren't against bullies, but against the judgment of your own neighbors. One morning, Lydia arrived at school to find a broken window. Glass scattered across the classroom floor. On the blackboard, chalk scrawled cruel words. Biker Pet. Her hands trembled as she erased the message. She didn't want the children to see. But one student, little Emma, came in early and gasped. "Ms. Marlo, who did this?" Lydia forced a smile, voice steady. "Just cowards who don't understand kindness." When the other students came in, they worked in silence, their eyes darting to the jagged window edges. Lydia pushed forward, teaching as if nothing had changed. But her heart ached. Her classroom had been her sanctuary. Now it had been violated. That afternoon, Rex showed up, wordless at first. He surveyed the glass, then looked at Lydia. "They won't stop until they break you." Her eyes pleaded. "Please, no violence." Rex's gaze softened. "Not violence. Truth. Sometimes you have to stand in the light, even if people throw stones." Lydia wasn't sure she was brave enough. 2 days later, the school board called an emergency meeting. Lydia sat in the front row, palms damp. The room was packed with townspeople, some glaring, some nodding encouragingly. A board member cleared his throat. Ms. Marlo, recent events have caused disruption. Parents are concerned about the presence of motorcycle gangs around children. The word gang stung deeply. Lydia wanted to explain, but her voice faltered. She saw parents shifting, waiting for her to defend herself. Before she could speak, the double doors swung open. Rex walked in, flanked by several Iron Horsemen. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some men tensed, but Rex raised his hand calmly. "We didn't come to threaten," he said, his voice steady. "We came to tell the truth. This woman gave her ring, her most precious memory, so children could have books. And when she was ridiculed, we stood by her. That's not a crime. That's honor." The room fell silent. Lydia's eyes welled with tears. For the first time, she wasn't alone in the firing line. Before the board could respond, a small voice piped up from the crowd. Emma, Lydia's youngest student, stepped forward, clutching a dog-eared book. "She told us stories," Emma said bravely. "Before Ms. Marlo, we didn't have enough books. She reads with us. She stays late. She helps when we're scared. She's not bad. She's the best teacher." Other children followed, voices overlapping. "She bought pencils. She gave me lunch when I forgot mine. She told me I was smart." Parents shifted, moved by the honesty of children who knew nothing of politics. Lydia covered her mouth, fighting back sobs. She had carried the humiliation for weeks. Now her students carried her. Rex folded his arms, voice low. "There's your proof. You want to throw stones at her? You'll have to explain to every one of these kids why." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. The meeting was adjourned without a vote. As the crowd dispersed, Rex approached Lydia. "You see? They can't argue with truth, especially when it comes from the innocent." Lydia could only nod, tears streaming down her face. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the books, but for the unexpected allies who had given her back her voice. Months later, Lydia's classroom had become a place whispered about with reverence. Not just for its overflowing shelves, but for its story. The story of a widow who gave up her ring, and 100 unlikely guardians who ensured her sacrifice blossomed into dignity. She still wore the silver band every day. When her students asked, she smiled. "It reminds me that even loss can give birth to something beautiful." The bullies never came back. The town's whispers grew quieter, replaced by nods of respect, and every now and then the rumble of engines passed by the school. Not as a threat, but as a promise. One evening, Lydia stood at her door, listening to the fading roar. She squeezed her hand around the ring, whispering, "Thank you, Michael. Your love lives on, not just in me, but in them." The sunset painted the sky, and Lydia understood. Dignity isn't taken, it's chosen. And sometimes it's protected by angels on wheels. Sacrifice often feels like a loss, but it can become the seed of something far greater. Lydia's story shows us that dignity, courage, and love always find a way back. If this touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more extraordinary true stories.